Are you ready to begin?
I am.
It's you.
I never stopped looking for you.
The candlelight flickered across the grand chamber, throwing shadows that danced over the polished marble floor. He stood at the altar, cold and controlled, staring at the woman in the ivory gown. Her veil concealed her face, her hands trembling slightly as she clutched a small bouquet. This was not love, not choice, not a moment of warmth. It was duty, obligation, a marriage arranged in secrecy. The priest's voice echoed softly. "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" He said the words without emotion. She answered, without memory of the night before, without knowledge of who he truly was. Vows were exchanged in the darkness. Silence swallowed the room, and then the veil lifted. Her eyes met his, and his heart stopped. The woman he had spent years searching for, the girl he had loved and lost, was standing before him. She didn't recognize him. She had no memory of the past they shared. And in that instant, he realized that everything had changed, but so had the rules of their hearts. The stranger he married was no longer a stranger. She was his lost love, and she had been waiting in secret. The storm raged outside the towering walls of Blackwood Manor, shaking the leaded glass windows and rattling the ancient chandeliers. The wind tore through the estate grounds, tossing loose leaves across the cobblestone path. Inside, the great hall was silent, except for the soft echo of footsteps and the occasional crackle of the fireplace. Ethan Blackwood, the Duke of Blackwood, stood at the far end of the hall. His posture was rigid, his dark coat perfectly aligned, and his piercing blue eyes cold and calculating. Yet beneath the stoic exterior, his heart raced. This night had been planned meticulously, every detail orchestrated to perfection. But the sight of her, standing veiled, trembling, made all careful preparation feel fragile, fleeting. Barbara Hartley, unaware of the full truth, stood at the altar. Her veil concealed her face, leaving only the curve of her shoulders visible beneath the flowing ivory fabric. She held a small bouquet tightly in her hands, knuckles white, but her body was poised, each movement controlled. She had come here not to marry a man, but to fulfill an obligation she had never wished to accept. The storm outside mirrored the turmoil within her chest. The priest's voice reverberated softly across the hall. "Do you take this woman to be your wife?" Ethan's jaw tightened. He spoke, his voice calm but deliberate. "I do." Ava's own reply was almost inaudible, her lips barely forming the words. "I do." The words felt like chains locking her fate. She didn't remember the moment she agreed, or even why she had come. And yet, the contract of marriage was real, sealed in shadow and obligation. Silence fell over the hall. The echo of the final vows faded into the dark corners, leaving only the two of them standing beneath the towering chandeliers, bathed in a golden glow. Ethan didn't look at her, yet every nerve in his body was tuned to her presence. She, unaware of his identity, felt an inexplicable tension pressing against her chest. The veil lifted slowly, and for the first time, their eyes met. Time seemed to stop. The woman in front of him, it wasn't a stranger, it was her. Elena Hartley, the girl he had loved and lost years ago, the girl whose memory haunted him silently. She stood here, married to him in name only, oblivious to the past that bound them. His breath caught. The firelight flickered across her soft features, the flowing hair, the trembling hands. Every detail brought back memories he had buried deep, memories of laughter, stolen glances, and promises never spoken aloud. But she didn't recognize him, not as he had hoped, not as he remembered her. The storm outside intensified, shaking the hall once more. He clenched his fists at his side, struggling to maintain composure. She had become a stranger in the body he knew intimately, a stranger standing as his wife. Ava stepped back slightly, glancing around the hall, suddenly aware of the cold emptiness surrounding them. The grandeur of the estate seemed to amplify her isolation. Servants had withdrawn quietly, leaving only the two of them beneath the chandeliers. The echo of the priest's final words lingered, haunting, emphasizing the impossibility of the situation. Who are you?" she asked at last, her voice trembling. Ethan's eyes remained fixed on her. He wanted to speak, to reveal the truth, to break the carefully constructed barrier between them. But he knew the time was not yet. "You may call me your husband," he said finally, controlled and distant, "and I shall answer only when necessary." Ava blinked, confusion clouding her features. She turned her gaze downward, focusing on her hands, the delicate bouquet she barely held steady. She did not understand the man before her, nor the circumstances that had led her to this moment. She did not yet know she had been given a second chance at love, nor that the stranger in front of her was the very soul she had lost. The evening stretched on. Candlelight cast long shadows across the hall, flickering against the carved walls and gilded frames. Ethan observed her every movement, silent, patient, and calculating. He watched as she adjusted the bouquet, straightened her posture, and quietly scanned the empty hall. Every subtle gesture revealed her character, her strength, and her independence. 3 days passed in this manner, Ava performing her duties as a new bride, unaware of the danger and intrigue that surrounded her. Ethan, still disguised as a controlled, distant figure, tested her honesty, her patience, and her ability to act with kindness without expectation of reward. In the early hours, he had arranged small tasks, tending to the horses, mending fences, and assisting with the garden. Each test was subtle, intended to reveal her true character. She complied without complaint, her grey eyes steady and unwavering, unaware of the careful scrutiny she was under. At each moment, Ethan saw the same girl he had lost, strong, capable, morally upright, yet human and vulnerable. Each glance, each movement, each small act of selfless action confirmed for him that she had remained unchanged, her heart as pure as it had been the day he last saw her. By the end of the 3rd day, Ethan knew he could no longer wait. The moment of truth had arrived. He revealed himself fully, stepping forward from the shadows of the great hall, removing all pretense. "Ava," he said, his voice rich, steady, and unmistakable. Ava froze, her grey eyes widened. There was something familiar in the timbre of his voice, a resonance she could not place. Her heart fluttered uncertainly. She looked at him fully for the first time. You are not who you claimed to be," she said softly. "I am Ethan Blackwood," he replied, letting the words settle. "The man you married, and the man who has watched over you for 3 days." Shock, disbelief, and 1,000 emotions flickered across her face. She stepped back, hands rising slightly in instinctive defense. Why would you?" Ethan held up a hand to halt her. "Because I had to know. I had to see the truth of your heart before revealing who I truly am. You have been honest, brave, and unwavering. You deserve to know me as I am, not as a stranger observing in silence." Ava blinked, struggling to reconcile the man before her with the stranger she had married. Every moment from the past 3 days flooded back, her instinctive trust, her competence, her selfless care in every task. And now, the reality hit her. The man she had been unknowingly drawn to, who had orchestrated her trials, was the man she had loved and lost years ago. She stumbled slightly, emotions surging. I don't know what to say." Ethan stepped closer, his eyes never leaving hers. "You don't need to say anything, not yet. Just know that this was not arranged to control or deceive you. It was to protect you, and to ensure that when you finally recognized me, you could see the truth of who I am and who you are." Tears welled in her eyes, and she pressed a hand to her chest. The storm outside had faded, leaving a serene stillness that mirrored the fragile calm in her heart. Slowly, she reached toward him. Their hands met, tentative but grounding, connecting past and present, memory and lost time. For the first time since the marriage, Ava felt the warmth of trust, the recognition of love, and the fragile, unspoken promise that their story was only beginning, not as strangers, but as 2 souls reunited through fate, loss, and courage. The morning dawned pale and misty over Blackwood Manor. A soft drizzle settled across the estate, soaking the manicured lawns and the stone paths that led to the stables. The rain mingled with the faint smell of damp earth and the lingering scent of autumn leaves. Inside the manor, Ava Hartley moved through her duties with a quiet focus, unaware of the eyes observing her from the shadows. Ethan Blackwood, the Duke disguised as a humble clerk named Mr. Penn, followed silently. His brown coat was plain, his boots worn, and his presence almost invisible to everyone except her. For 3 days, he had watched her, each motion, each word, each small act of integrity, testing the true measure of her heart. The first task of the morning was the care of the manor's prized mare. Ava approached the animal, her hand steady, brushing its neck with practiced precision. The Duke observed every motion, noting how she adjusted the saddle, the gentle way she inspected the horse's muscles, the attention to details only someone with real understanding of animals would notice. "You are pressing too hard here," she said quietly to him, sensing where he had awkwardly placed his hands while pretending to help. "Feel the muscle beneath, adjust the girth slightly forward, place a folded cloth under it for a week." Ethan nodded, following her instructions carefully. He could see her heart in the precision of her movements, the patience in her hands. She was not performing for him, nor aware that she was being watched. Each deliberate act of honesty and competence told him more about her than any words could. The morning passed in quiet labor. She guided him through feeding the animals, mending fences, and checking the garden. Her gray eyes remained focused, her expression calm yet attentive. She spoke only when necessary, her voice firm and steady, reflecting both authority and gentleness. He watched as she corrected the stable boy's posture while lifting hay bales, instructed him on the proper way to hold tools, and handled the animals with unwavering care. By midday, the rain had softened to a drizzle, leaving the estate shrouded in a soft mist. Ava carried a basket of herbs and vegetables from the garden to the kitchen. The Duke followed a few steps behind, taking in the scene, the way she moved, the weight of responsibility she bore effortlessly, the quiet strength in her every gesture. He had intended these 3 days to be a test, but he found himself deeply affected by the woman before him. They sat on a low stone wall for lunch. Ava handed him a simple meal of bread and butter, accompanied by cold ham and a cup of water. He marveled at the simplicity of it, tasting flavors that no royal feast could ever replicate. "You eat as if you haven't eaten in days," she said lightly, her tone curious but not mocking. "I have not," he admitted, savoring the honest taste and the quiet moment. She glanced at him briefly, a flicker of curiosity in her eyes. "Why are you here? You have followed me, observed me, and yet you never explain yourself." He exhaled slowly. "I am here to see the truth of your heart," he said. "Not for my gain, not for curiosity, but to witness the integrity, honesty, and courage you carry." Ava's brow furrowed slightly. "You judge me already?" "I do not judge," he said, his voice calm. "I observe." She studied him for a moment, her expression unreadable. "You are strange, Mr. Penn." "I am," he replied softly. "And you are remarkable." The afternoon passed as they worked together, repairing a broken fence in the garden. Ava drove nails with precision, her arm flexing with the effort, while the Duke held the post steadily. The splinters dug into his palms, but he did not flinch. Every detail, every flicker of her eyes, every word she spoke about the work confirmed what he already knew. Her character was unwavering. "You are not afraid of labor," he said quietly. "Nor responsibility," she replied. "And I have learned that it cannot wait for others to act." He remained silent, observing. He had seen many women in noble houses, taught to flatter, to perform, to charm. She was nothing like them. She did not bend or bow to appearances. She did not measure her actions by what others expected. She was herself, steadfast and independent. The late afternoon brought another test. Ava noticed a loose post in the orchard fence and motioned for him to hold it while she drove a nail. He complied, careful to follow her instructions precisely. She observed the way he held the post, the angle of his hands, and noted how he learned from her subtle corrections. He was a fast learner, but she did not know that this entire exercise was part of a hidden test. After the work was done, they walked to the orchard, carrying the basket of herbs. Ava studied the growth of the plants, the health of the soil, and carefully selected the sprigs she needed. The Duke watched silently, noticing how she evaluated each decision, how she balanced practicality with kindness, how she protected the garden without hesitation or expectation of reward. "You care for every detail," he said quietly, as if more to himself than to her. "I do what must be done," she replied. "For the estate, for the animals, for those who depend on it." He inclined his head. That was all the confirmation he needed. She had passed his test. She was true. Her heart was not swayed by wealth, power, or fear. She acted with integrity and independence, even when no one was watching. As evening fell, the storm cleared, leaving the estate bathed in the pale light of the moon. The Duke finally approached her openly, stepping into the moonlight that caught the edges of her veil and the delicate embroidery of her gown. "Ava Hartley," he said softly, revealing his voice for the first time without pretense. "You have proven yourself beyond measure. For 3 days I watched, not to test your patience, nor to manipulate, but to see the heart of the woman who stands before me." She looked up, surprised by the tone, unsure of how to respond. "I am not who you think I am," he continued. "I am not the clerk you have observed. I am Ethan Blackwood, Duke of Blackwood, the one your family thought you were to marry, and yet you have never truly known me until now." Shock crossed her face. She stepped back instinctively, her grey eyes wide and confused. The man who had been a stranger for 3 days, who had observed her silently, was now the very Duke her family had intended her to marry. I, she stammered. Words failed her. Her heart raced, emotions colliding, fear, awe, disbelief, and the faint stirrings of something she had thought lost. He stepped closer, his gaze steady and unwavering. "You acted as yourself, independent, honest, and true. That is why I am here, not to control you, but to honor what I have seen. You are not a woman to be guided by titles or wealth. You are a woman to be respected, cherished, and recognized for who you are." Ava's hands trembled slightly as she folded them together. She had been observed, tested, and yet he did not condescend. He had not judged. He had witnessed her heart, her courage, her integrity. For a long moment they stood silently, the moonlight illuminating their faces. The storm outside had ended, leaving only the soft rustle of leaves and the faint, distant howl of wind across the estate. Finally, she spoke. Why tell me now?" "Because you are worthy of knowing," he replied, "and because now the choice is yours." The weight of the 3 days, the hidden identity, and the trials they had endured hung between them. And in that delicate, fragile silence, a bond formed, not born of convenience, duty, or title, but of respect, understanding, and the quiet recognition of truth. Ava slowly exhaled, her chest rising and falling. She was still unsure of the man before her, of the obligations and emotions tied to her family, and of the marriage that had begun in secrecy. Yet one thing was clear: the stranger she had married was no longer a stranger. He had revealed himself, and in doing so had shown her the heart of a man who had waited, watched, and understood her in a way no one else ever could. And for the first time in days, Ava allowed herself to wonder, could a marriage begun in darkness and secrecy become the path to love, understanding, and the reclamation of lost trust? The dawn arrived slowly over Blackwood Manor, casting soft streaks of sunlight across the marble floors and ornate tapestries. The storm of the previous nights had left the gardens drenched, droplets glistening on every leaf and cobblestone. Inside, the manor was quiet except for the gentle sounds of servants preparing breakfast and the subtle echo of distant birds calling from the estate's orchard. Ava Hartley stood near the tall windows of the great hall, her hands folded nervously before her. The ivory gown she had worn for the wedding lay folded neatly in her room, replaced by a simpler morning dress. Yet even in the modest attire, she radiated poise, dignity, and a quiet strength that no title could ever dictate. Ethan Blackwood, still maintaining the guise of a modest clerk named Mr. Penn, approached from the shadows. His steps were measured, his eyes fixed on her every move. Though his coat was simple, every inch of his bearing betrayed a man accustomed to command and authority. He had observed her for 3 days, carefully noting her actions, speech and judgment, each moment building a picture of her integrity and character. As he stepped into the light, Ava's gaze flickered toward him, cautious but composed. "You are early," she said, her grey eyes narrowing slightly. "I did not expect you to arrive before breakfast." "I prefer the morning," Ethan said quietly. His voice carried a calm authority, measured and precise, but beneath it lay a current of restrained emotion. It is easier to observe truth at first light when actions are unguarded and intentions cannot be hidden. Ava tilted her head slightly, curiosity and unease mingling in her expression. "Observe. You are still a stranger to me. Who are you really?" Ethan paused, allowing the silence to stretch just long enough to test her composure. Her hand rested lightly on the back of a chair, her posture straight and unwavering despite the tension in the room. He studied her closely, taking in the subtle movements of her hands, the steadiness of her breath, the clarity of her gaze. Every gesture confirmed the strength he had already sensed in her. Finally, he spoke. "I am not the clerk you believe me to be. I am Ethan Blackwood, the Duke of Blackwood." Her eyes widened, a flicker of shock and disbelief passing over her features. She instinctively took a step back, her hands tightening slightly. The air between them seemed to crackle with the weight of revelation. "The Duke," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the soft rustle of the morning wind through the open windows. "Yes," he said, his tone calm, but laden with the gravity of the truth. "For 3 days I observed you, not to manipulate, not to deceive, but to see the measure of your heart." Ava's mind raced. The memory of the past 3 days, the subtle guidance, the small tests, the quiet observations, all began to piece together. The way he had watched her tend the horses, adjust the fence posts, and care for the garden. The way he had deferred to her judgment, allowing her competence to shine. Now it made sense, though the revelation was almost too much to bear. You were testing me?" she asked, her voice trembling with a mix of indignation and curiosity. "Yes," he admitted, "not to see what I could gain, but to see who you truly are." Ava swallowed hard. Her lips pressed together as a wave of conflicting emotions surged through her. Anger, awe, disbelief, and something else she could not yet name. Her grey eyes searched his face, trying to decipher the man behind the facade. The same man who had married her in the dark, the same man who had watched her as a stranger, was now standing before her as the truth of his identity. "I don't understand," she said finally. Why would you do this? Why not simply reveal yourself?" Ethan's gaze softened, though his posture remained poised and commanding. "Because I needed to see the truth of you without the influence of my title, without the power of my name. I needed to know that your heart and character were genuine, untainted by fear or obligation." Ava's chest rose and fell rapidly. The enormity of his words, the audacity of his tests, and the intensity of his scrutiny left her breathless. She felt both exposed and strangely validated. She had acted entirely as herself, and yet she had been observed, analyzed, and deemed worthy by a man whose presence could command any room. She began, searching for words that could capture her mixture of emotions. I couldn't have known." "You acted without knowing." "Yes," Ethan interrupted, his voice quiet but firm, "and that is why I honor you. You did not perform for me or for the estate. You acted out of integrity, skill, and honesty. That is why you have earned the truth of who I am." Ava looked down, her fingers tightening around the fabric of her dress. Her mind flashed back to each moment of the past 3 days, the stable, the orchard, the simple tasks she had performed, all under his watchful gaze. She realized how much she had been tested, yet how gently, how respectfully he had observed. Her chest swelled with a mixture of relief, awe, and the faintest stirrings of trust. Ethan stepped closer, closing the distance between them. "You do not have to respond to this immediately," he said softly. "Not with words, not with decisions. I only ask that you recognize the truth I have shown, and consider the choice before you with clarity, unclouded by fear or obligation. Ava's grey eyes lifted to meet his. The storm of emotions that had raged within her for days, the confusion, the fear, the awe, and the growing awareness of her heart, settled into a fragile calm. She realized that the man before her, though powerful, had never attempted to control her. Instead, he had revealed her strength, her honesty, and her capacity for courage in a way that no title, no wealth, and no expectation could accomplish. I will consider it," she said finally, her voice low but resolute. "But this is overwhelming. I don't know how to feel." Ethan inclined his head, a faint, rare smile brushing his lips. "Then let us begin slowly, one day at a time. You have proven yourself to me, not because of the trials, but because of who you are. That is the truth you can hold on to." For a long moment, they stood in the hall, bathed in the morning light filtering through the windows. Outside, the estate lay drenched and glistening after the storm, a world renewed. Inside, two hearts paused, suspended between past and present, obligation and desire, fear and trust. Ava's hand trembled slightly as she lowered it from her chest. She had been tested, observed, and judged, not for obedience, not for status, but for her true self. And in that recognition, she felt a strange relief, a fragile hope, and a spark of something she had long buried, the possibility of love, reclaimed, restored, and untainted by deceit or pretense. Ethan reached out slowly, his hand hovering near hers. "There is no rush," he said. "No expectation, only honesty, only truth. When you are ready, you will know what to do." Ava looked up at him, her grey eyes reflecting a mixture of fear, curiosity, and cautious hope. For the first time in years, she felt seen, not as a daughter, a ward, or a bride in a contract, but as a woman of strength, intelligence, and heart. And in that quiet, suspended moment, she realized something remarkable. She had been given a second chance, a chance to trust again, to act freely, and perhaps to love, not because of obligation, but because her heart would choose it. The sun rose slowly over Blackwood Manor, spilling golden light across the gardens and courtyard. The storm of the past nights had passed, leaving a fresh, earthy scent in the air and the soft rustle of leaves in the wind. Inside the manor, the great hall was quiet, yet heavy with anticipation. Ava Hartley stood by the window, her hands resting on the windowsill as her grey eyes scanned the misty estate grounds. The past 3 days had been a whirlwind of emotion, secrecy, and tension. She had been married to a stranger, guided through tasks and tests she did not understand, and now the truth had been revealed. Ethan Blackwood, the man she had unknowingly married, was the Duke she had long thought lost to her past. Her chest tightened as memories of the stormy wedding night, the uncertain trials, and the hidden observations came flooding back. She had been tested, observed, and yet she had never once been asked to perform or pretend. Every action had been hers, every choice her own. And now, faced with the truth, she struggled to reconcile the man standing before her with the stranger she had met in the darkness. Ethan stepped into the sunlight, removing his coat and revealing the dark blue of his formal attire beneath. His eyes, intense and unwavering, met hers with a mix of hope, regret, and restrained longing. He had watched her grow through these days, not as a duke, not as a ruler, but as a man quietly falling in love again with the woman he had never truly forgotten. "You are here," Ava said softly, her voice trembling slightly. I still don't know what to say." "You don't have to," he replied. "Not yet. Words are useless until the heart is ready to hear them." Ava's eyes narrowed slightly, scanning his face, searching for a hint of deceit, a sign that he had manipulated her, that all the attention and care had been a test of convenience rather than honesty. But she found nothing, only sincerity, only patience, only a man waiting for her to accept the truth. "I feel overwhelmed," she admitted. 3 days, and now this revelation. I don't know what to trust anymore." Ethan stepped closer, keeping a respectful distance, his voice soft. "You may not trust the world, but you can trust your own actions. You have acted with integrity every day, without knowing I was watching. That is why I have revealed myself now, so you may see the truth, not just of me, but of yourself." Ava took a deep breath. The tension in her shoulders slowly eased, replaced by a fragile understanding. She had been measured, tested, and observed, but never betrayed. Her independence had been respected, her judgment valued, and her heart remained hers alone. "You've been patient," she said softly. "Even with all the secrets, all the hiding." Ethan nodded. "Because the truth deserved patience, and you deserved respect." She looked down at her hands, trembling slightly. The ring on her finger was no longer a symbol of confusion or coercion. It was proof of trust, a bond that had begun in secrecy, yes, but one that could now grow freely, without pretense. "And now?" she asked. Her voice was barely a whisper. "Now what happens?" "Now," he said, "we start again, honestly, openly. No tests, no secrets, no disguise. You will meet me as I am, and I will see you as you truly are." Ava lifted her gaze. The sunlight caught her eyes, giving them a soft glow. She saw in him not just the Duke, but the man she had loved and lost, the one who had observed her quietly, who had protected her without imposing himself, the man who had waited for her heart to reveal itself without coercion. She began, then paused. Her emotions swirled. Relief, fear, anticipation, and the first stirrings of hope. "I am afraid," she admitted, "of losing myself again, of trusting too soon." Ethan stepped closer, placing a hand gently over hers. "Then let us take it slowly. There is no rush. We rebuild, day by day, together. I will not take more from you than you choose to give." Her breath caught. The sincerity in his eyes, the warmth in his touch, and the patience in his words calmed the storm inside her. She could feel the years of uncertainty, the fear and the hidden longing slowly giving way to trust. They spent the morning walking through the manor's orchard. The trees, heavy with fruit, cast dappled shadows across the ground. Each step was measured, each glance deliberate. Ethan did not overwhelm her with words. He allowed silence to speak, and in that quiet, their hearts began to reconnect. "You've changed," she said softly at last, breaking the stillness. "Have I?" he asked, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "Yes," she admitted. "In 3 days, I've seen so much. You are careful, patient, and kind in ways I never expected." Ethan's smile grew slightly. "I am still the same man, Ava. Only now you know me as I truly am, and I see you, not as a bride, not as a subject of duty, but as the woman I have loved and waited for." Ava's grey eyes filled with tears. The storm inside her finally began to settle. For the first time in what felt like an eternity, she could breathe. She had faced confusion, fear, and manipulation, but through it all, her own integrity and courage had guided her. And now, that strength was recognized, valued, and cherished by the one man who mattered most. They reached the orchard gate. The light of the setting sun filtered through the branches, casting a golden glow across the path. Ethan took her hand gently, and she allowed it without hesitation. Their fingers intertwined, bridging the gap between past and present, loss and rediscovery. "Do you trust me?" he asked softly, looking into her eyes. I will try," she said, her voice steady despite the tears. "I want to." Ethan smiled, relief and emotion reflected in his gaze. "Then we begin again, not as strangers who were forced together, but as two people who have found their way back to each other." The wind stirred, carrying the scent of rain-soaked earth and blooming flowers. The world felt renewed, and in that quiet, sun-drenched moment, Ava realized that love, true love, could survive tests, trials, and time. The Duke of Blackwood and the woman he had loved and lost walked slowly back toward the manor, side by side. The past remained behind them, The storm faded, and the future, uncertain, fragile, and full of promise, stretched ahead. In silence, in trust, and in the quiet acknowledgement of their hearts, they stepped forward together.